Richard the doorman got it.
Oh, good. We probably don't need to have a camera.
Okay, can everyone see? If anyone has computers in here that have mics on, please mute.
No.
Small window.
I'm trying to mute it.
It is. Hi, everyone. You can see us and you can hear us. I'm going to reduce the window here to show the agenda. So I'll have Denise do her welcome. And if everybody could, we're not going to do full introductions. We have quite a few people on the line today, but if you are new to the group or you'd like to introduce yourself, or if you've invited a farmer or someone to join us today, if you could please put in your chat your name and the organization you're with, that would be great. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be on today. Glad to open up this the fall State Technical Committee agenda. This will be the first quarter of fiscal year 2025. So big thanks to Susan and Ted Evans for setting this up. And I hope that we have new representatives on the call today. I know we've gotten a lot of interest in folks being members of the organization. So very much appreciate that interest and looking forward to having more dialogue. Because, Susan, because folks within the room don't get to introduce themselves, can we have them introduce? And then as soon as we're done with introductions, we'll kick it right over to the watershed folks for an update on PA watershed region. Okay. Thank you.
Ken, if you're having trouble hearing or any technical glitches, just put it in the chat. And I have Kami Hughes, who's nice enough each time to monitor the chat and let us know if anything needs to be adjusted. Okay,
So
thank
do we-
you.
Do we want to kick it off?
Yes, please.
Sure. Ryan
Speak
Campbell.
loudly.
I'm sorry. Ryan Campbell, State Grazing Specialist.
Melissa Hanner, the easement program manager for NRCS. Heather Smeltz, AASTC for water resources.
Dan Ludwig, State Resource Conservationist with NRCS.
Tim Peters, State Engineer with NRCS.
Mark Buckwater, civil engineer with NRCS.
I'm Erin Latavik. I'm a civil engineer with HRG, your next door neighbor. And we're the state engineer working with Penn State Center.
Wonderful.
Andy Hibbs, project engineer with HRG.
Amy Hughes here at the state office. I'm the BSS,
What's the BSS?
Business Services.
No acronyms.
Sorry.
Hello, Noah Irwin with PASA Sustainable Agriculture.
Thanks for coming. Abigail?
I'm Abigail Appleman. I am the outreach coordinator for NRCS in Pennsylvania.
And again, I'm Susan Parry. I'm the state assistant state conservationist for partnerships. And anything outstanding in the chat that we should bring up, or
No, the owl was weary and then now it's good.
it's good? Okay. So we'll start our first presentation. Congratulations, Abigail. That's nice. We're going to start with a program highlight and presentation from Heather Smeltz as our Assistant State Conservationist for Water Resources. Let me just bring that up for you and we'll get started. Wait, I got to share.
I stand here. The owl can see me.
Oh, no. Hold on just a second.
Yes, it can. So you're not like getting my backside? No.
Yep. Okay, good. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Okay, so if you have it like that though, I can't advance doing it through your presentation mode.
Thank you. Come on now. It takes a village, doesn't it? Low latency game mode is on.
I feel like I should be.
Yeah. Okay, you should be good to go now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heather Smeltz. I'm the Assistant State Conservationist for Water Resources. Myself and my colleague Mark Buckwater will be presenting today on the watershed programs. We have 3 of them in Pennsylvania that we work through. We want to give you an overview. And then we're going to probably spend the bulk of the time on Mark's program talking about the Emergency Watershed Protection Program, because that's the one that's really gung ho right now, especially with the after effects of Tropical Storm Debbie. So watershed programs encompasses 3 specific programs, all looped under the watershed program branch. We have the Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations Program, we have the Watershed Rehabilitation Program, and the Emergency Watershed Protection Program. And of course, they all have acronyms, which you can see in front of you. And to make it shorter, we often call watershed operations, watershed ops, or WFPO. And we're going to start talking about that one. So NRCS has been in the business of flooding for years, long time, even back to our SCS days. And you can see the dates in front of you. 1954 was the big event that kicked off the Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations Program by the initiation of the PLA 3566 law, which allows the Secretary of Ag to work with public entities to address resource concerns, oftentimes flooding, sometimes other land treatment, and we'll talk about that. And then following in 2000 was the Watershed Rehabilitation Program. I'll explain why that one happened. In the 1950s, the Emergency Watershed Protection Program has been around since then. So these are all well-established programs that kind of have their own little niche. They're not as well known for, NRCS isn't as well known for them as for our farm bill type work, but they still do really good work on farms and public lands. So The Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations Program is often used as a proactive approach to public flooding, to dealing with flooding. And that's where a lot of the work has historically been done in the past, since about late 50s, early 60s time period. It also fits in for land treatment type projects that normally EQIP or RCPP or something like that would be used for, except it fits in where those don't. So when we're talking about like working on public lands, when we're talking about the requirements, an operator to be a farmer, when we're talking about AGI and program payment caps and things like that, or doing something innovative that hasn't quite been done before, that's more where the PL 566, the Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations Program, fits in. So like I said before, it allows this partnership. It's a public partnership between NRCS and some kind of entity, some kind of sponsoring local organization. They need to be have the ability to levy taxes. They need to have the rights of eminent domain. They need to be able to provide long-term operation and maintenance on these projects. So we're generally looking at a unit of the state. We're generally looking at a county or some kind of other municipal entity to be able to do this work. So different from the ag side, working with the public and those public entities rather than doing individual contracts with landowners to get the work done. And because of that, it's locally led, and NRCS provides all the technical and oftentimes a lot of the financial assistance. The slide in front of you shows the different projects that we've worked on across the years. If you've been around a while, you might recognize a name like Topahakan Creek or some of the acid mine drainage projects. The light blue that you see are the land treatment projects addressing those resource concerns on site. The dark blue are the projects that were generally for flood control. And those are the projects that helped install the flood control dams that we have across the state. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So I mentioned that it's a public law. So there are definitely federal purposes that these projects need to fall under. That flood prevention can also have sub benefits or sub purposes of public recreation, fish and wildlife, water supply, water quality management. Oftentimes those are incorporated with doing some kind of flood detention structure like a dam, but those could be added on benefits, as well as the straight up flood control. And then we also have the land treatment. So talking quickly for some of those flood control, in front of you, you see some of the options that we can do or that we often look at. We look at those hard options like the dams, the levees, the dikes, channels to help improve capacity, but then we also look at some of those non-structural options like elevating properties that are in flood-prone areas or trying to remove those properties from flood-prone areas or doing dikes and things around those properties. Are there other things that can be done to protect those properties from consistent flooding? And again, this is a proactive approach. And then on the ag side, in our heyday with this, we were doing ag work, very specific ag work that was very similar to what you would see with EQIP. And we were also doing acid mine drainage work. And our partner states like West Virginia is still continuing with that acid mine drainage work. And we could too, if there's interest. Some of our newer projects though right now on the land treatment side, we're working on a project to work to reduce or stabilize or remove legacy sediment within the stream channels to try and reduce some of the sediment loads coming down through. The other thing we're looking at right now is working with spent mushroom composters to try and address the resource concerns coming off of compost piles that may not have been addressed before. And both of those are a little bit atypical and don't quite fit in the normal equilibrium. So that's why they're going PL 566, going watershed ops. So how does it work? I joke that PL 566 or watershed ops is the crockpot program because it's with EQIP in the Farm Bill, you can be in and out over a 5-year time period, or planning 1 year, design and building in the next 2 or 3, and you can really see your progress quick. But because of the scale of these projects, it's a lot longer of a time period. It's generally a 2 to 3 year planning process to develop that watershed plan of what you should do and where in that watershed you should do it. And then depending on what you're doing, if you're doing flood prevention, a 2 to 3 year design, which includes permitting. Permitting can take a while. And then the construction parts of it. If we're doing flood prevention, maybe it's 2 years, but if we're doing something on the land treatment side where we're going to be working on individual sites with possible landowners, that could be a 5-year project to try and get each of those different sites implemented. So we generally say it's at best 6 years process, but oftentimes it's a lot longer. But I also like to say that you get a lot better food out of a crock pot than you do a microwave, except for maybe the cakes in a mug. And some of you have heard that joke before, but it's a very deliberate, very public, very vetted process to make sure that we are making the best use we can of that taxpayer dollars that's being afforded to these projects. So I mentioned that we developed that the Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations Program can help or used to help install our flood control dams. We have about 90 flood control dams that were built by the agency in Pennsylvania and about 12,000 nationwide. And as we walk through this, you'll see why there's the need for this program. But what the program does is it allows the owners of those dams, those public entities, to come back to NRCS with their aging dam and say, hey, we'd like to upgrade this, make it as safe as possible for today's standards and specifications. And it allows NRCS to work with those sponsors to be able to do that. We can also upgrade them if needed for additional water supply. We've done that on some of our dams, or some of those other purposes that I previously mentioned. So if you look at the slide in front of you, it's a graph of the number of dams that were completed each year. Now this is from and if you look between 1963 and 1965, we averaged just under 2 dams a day completion across the agency, across the country. Most of those had a 50-year project life. So if you start doing the math at the end of 50 years, I went back. I hit the wrong button. At the end of 50 years, 2015, somewhere around there at best, what do you do with the dams? They're aging gracefully, they're doing their job well, but what do you do with them? That's where the Watershed Rehabilitation Program comes in.
Heather, I think you need to explain a little bit. Some of the dams in the plains and the Midwest, we call them dams, and they're not what we would consider dams in Pennsylvania. So can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. So a lot of the dams, so the Pennsylvania NRCS dams are generally built across a channel, an active channel, and they're meant to detain flood water that's coming down through. A lot of the ones in the Midwest are built often in dry gulches and things like that. So they're still detaining the flood water, but there's not an active stream passing through. There are also different risks associated with the dams and where they're at, how big they are, and how much they detain. Most of our dams here in Pennsylvania, all those 90, are considered high hazard potential dams, which means that if they would ever fail, there's a risk down below of loss of life or catastrophic damage. So it's not that the dams themselves are at a high risk of failure, it's associated with what would happen down below if they did fail. A lot of the dams in the western parts of the state, from where they're located, are often a lower or a significant hazard and not quite so high hazard. Did I catch what you wanted me, where you wanted me to go with that, Denise?
You did, except I think there are a lot in the Midwest that are much smaller scale than what we have, and they're not holding back near the amount of watershed or situation that. And so that is the reason for why some of those were happening so quickly. They were like this.
Yeah. They were also, I think, like Oklahoma has 1,200 of the dams, and they were one of the leaders in the dam construction across the agency, Oklahoma and Texas. So yeah. But over the years, the benefits that these dams have provided, we average about $22.8 million in benefits because of the flood reduction that the dams are providing annually. And and that's just the flood reduction. If you add in the rest of the benefits, like the water supply, the recreation, the fish and wildlife habitat, we're up to about $44.5 million in annual benefits that our dams are providing. So it's a great investment, and they're not cheap, but they're definitely doing their job. So we mentioned they're 50 years old, or they're getting there. One thing I want to point out is that the dams today are no less safe than the day they were originally built, even though they are getting up there. I'm soon, in a couple of years, reaching about that 50-year mark, and I'm not quite just as good, but I'm no less worse off than the day I was born, maybe. Okay, that's a really bad analogy.
Yeah,
Don't go with that. I have a better one for you in a minute. But I do want to point out that none of our dams in Pennsylvania are an imminent safety hazard. They are inspected twice a year, both by a professional engineer operated by the sponsor and by the state dam safety agency. So the dams are aging gracefully. They're doing a great job, and they're often silent sentinels because half the time people don't know they're there. And it's amazing how people are building in the floodplains down below with no awareness of the dams up above that are providing that flood protection. So why rehabilitate them? What's going on? I mean, they're doing what they're supposed to do. Well, times have changed. The dams weren't designed for seismic or earthquakes. It wasn't a concern at that time. The safety standards have changed. Did you know rainfall rates have changed and rainfall distribution patterns have changed? So like what was considered the 100-year storm in the 60s isn't a 100-year storm.
I wonder why.
I know. And did you know, and when fast water carrying sediment moves, it hits a pool, it drops out that sediment, and now some of the dams are losing their sediment storage capacity because they've been retaining sediment that would have been passed on downstream. Mm-hmm. So, and the hazard classifications changed on ours because of people moving in the floodplains downstream. So I tell the story. Tim and I go back and forth about always in presentations, you got to tell a story. The blue buggy chug. I call it a buggy chug. Some people call it a punch buggy. When I was a kid, my brother and I fought over who got to sit in the back seat of my dad's buggy chug. Because the buggy chugs, the Volkswagen Beetles from 1965 and earlier, didn't come with seatbelts. As a kid, that is a fabulous thing. And did you know when I was born, now I gave you a little insight in my age, when my mom left the hospital with me, the nurse wheeled my mom out of the hospital holding me. The nurse took me out of my mom's arms. My mom got in the car, buckled up, and the nurse gave me back to my mom. Did you know when I had my kids, if I didn't have a car seat for them, like they wouldn't have let the kids out of the hospital. Yeah. Well, what changed? Safety standards, right? In both those examples, safety standards changed. I would argue that this car, if it has been maintained properly, it's had its brakes, tires, oil changes, the normal operation and maintenance, it is just as safe today as it was the day it rolled off the lot. But it's not as safe as the new Volkswagen Beetles that are being produced today because of the safety standards. So how do we bring this Volkswagen Beetle, how do we bring those dams that were built back then up to current safety standards? So it's not that they're unsafe, they're just not as safe as they could be. In our way through, I said we have about 90 dams. We have 3 dams that have been completely rehabilitated. We have one that's wrapping up construction for the fall right now. We have 4 that are in design, 2 that are construction ready. They're just waiting on state funding, and 12 that are in the plan their way through. So we're working our way through and trying to make sure we reach all our dams. You can also see what on the graphic in front of you where all our dams are located across the state. And the rehabilitation process is a similar timeline, similar planning as similar funding process as the watershed ops, with the planning, the design, and the construction. The difference with this one is that for construction, NRCS funds a flat 65%. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mark. Yes. Yes, no question. like to come off of mute, or would you like to put it in chat? Sorry, back to you, Lakeford.
Is there a question or good?
Well, I can tell you
And
just
say
for the
continue.
fun of it, Conneautville Dam in Crawford County just finished up sheet pile installation in the auxiliary spillway, that bypass channel that goes around the dam if it ever gets too full. So that's like our big accomplishment right now. It's taken years for the sponsor to get their funding to be able to move. So we're in construction is fabulous. They're shutting down for the winter because it's northern Crawford County. Yeah, and we'll start back in spring. So hopefully next year we'll have a presentation for you at that point to show you construction and promote that success. So Mark?
All right. Great job, Heather. So I will talk a little bit about our third watershed program, which is our Emergency Watershed Protection Program, EWP. I have a nice overview. I'm going to, matter of time, move on quickly, but this is certainly a presentation and a research or resource you can use to look back on this. So public authority, so this one's PL 83516. Here's the statutory kind of behind it, but it's a federal emergency recovery program that can address flooding and erosion concerns in communities after a natural disaster. So in PA, that's typically a significant rainfall event. Some of the western states actually have fires, and that actually creates a big resource concern with the soil and actually causes more runoff in fire situations. So different disasters. Pennsylvania, it's typically a heavy storm event, acting a little bit like the FEMA Public Assistance Program. Models that a little bit with how it's disaster related. So when EWP, so it can get deployed on a federal emergency declaration. So if there's a presidential declaration for a storm event similar to what happened in North Carolina, you hear the news, FEMA's involved out there. NRCS could be deployed as well. And then a local declaration. So maybe damages don't meet the presidential declaration. Denise, as our state con, can issue a local emergency. So NRCS local coordination, flood protection, and it needs to stop additional erosion. So those are the two components for EWP. The measures remove threats, restore the natural environment, and we often use NRCS conservation practices when repairing these areas. Program eligibility. So it needs to be a natural event plus a watershed impairment. It needs to be an imminent threat to life or property. And that's where we get to that watershed emergency. Property we can protect with the program, permanent structures, houses, buildings, public utilities, and then actually we can come in for works with the dams we built and flood control structures if there's damage to those items we built back earlier, such as erosion in the spillway after an activation, we can come in with EWP. And then we can't do certain things like standing timber orchards or agronomic. So I quickly want to touch a little bit on some criteria in the state that we've set to try to set a baseline. So when we go out and evaluate sites, so we consider full-time residences within 50 feet of the eroding stream bank to kind of meet that imminent threat and kind of set a threshold. We do not consider outbuildings and seasonal homes eligible. So cabins up north will sometimes walk away if that's not the primary residence where someone's living. And then we can look into public utilities, and we've set that criteria closer to the 10 feet from a public utility. And then we can come in and remove debris and gravel bar material that's settled out if it meets the upper two criteria. And the program does come with some limitations. For example, operation and maintenance. So we're not necessarily coming in and fixing 50-year-old walls. It needs to be at failed, and if it's a few rocks that fell in, that's kind of a maintenance thing and not yet imminent in our opinion. We do not consider public and private roads or bridges or driveways where culverts blown out. We kind of limit it to the residence itself. If activities are taken ahead of us coming out and seeing the site, so say it was repaired right away, we would walk away in that situation. A few of the big ones to touch on. I wanted to kind of review kind of the process, kind of what we step through when a disaster comes in. So this is kind of our overarching process for the EWP program from start to finish. So I'll kind of move through that here. So the EDR is the first step, electronic disaster report. So that's where we investigate the damages, the storm event. We go on the National Weather Service and see if this kind of meets that imminent or heavy, kind of above the normal 2 to 3 inch rain event. But so we look that up, and then so for example, here this was Ida. This was a big event. There was actually 2 storms, so I went in and found information on kind of where it hit. Was mostly the southeast Pennsylvania there, and yeah, 12 to 15 inches in a 14-day period. So massive amount of rain, and we came in and did EWP. And a big thing here is so the southeast area, the Chester County, things like that, reached the federal threshold. Okay, so that brought in some federal dollars, but we were able to also partner with EWP and do the outlier counties that, that still give help and assistance where they didn't meet the threshold. So the process starts when a newsworthy event. So often maybe the governor addresses the damage or the storm. So I'll touch on some of the events we have going on here. The next big thing, which Heather talked about, was sponsors. So we, as the grant funding, in a sense, work through a sponsor, a local unit of government. So that the sponsor needs to apply through a simple request letter, and then we have a template that they can work off of, and that needs to submit it to us within 60 days of the event. So if there's no sponsor, there's no project. So landowners are eligible, okay, but they would have to find a sponsor, work through a sponsor. We often work, it's nice to have a county entity so they can go ahead and group a bunch of private landowners into one agreement. And then, like Heather talked about, we can do technical and financial assistance for the program. Sponsor things and responsibilities there noted that you guys can read through. And we do have a national sponsor guide, which is helpful to sponsors to read roles and responsibilities. They're getting into an EWP. Moving forward so once we do the disaster, we get sponsor requests. NRCS will go out and do a damage survey report. That details the damage, and the next slide talks a little bit about that, but the damage report then gets submitted and we get funding. So the next 2 slides here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the DSR and the funding. So within about 2 months after we get the request letter, we'll go in and have our staff go out and do a damage survey report. These are kind of the contents. The big thing is eligibility. So only NRCS will determine eligibility for the project. And these 4 criteria are kind of what we base that off, as well as things I've outlined. So are we protecting it from additional flooding and soil erosion? Will it reduce threats, restore hydraulic capacity? And then we look at, is it environmentally and economically sound? So we do kind of planning to make sure things are working out. And then staff engineers will do a cost estimate and a kind of project mitigation sketch. So that's kind of comes out of our office. Funding, let's talk about funding. So that DSR basically gets approved by headquarters, and then our headquarters in DC, and then they give us the funding. NRCS can pay up to 75% of the construction cost for recovery measures. There is an opportunity to do limited resources, which gets up to 90%. Currently, there's no limited resource counties or areas in Pennsylvania. So right now we're only getting the 75%, and then the sponsor, their request comes with a 25% match. And currently within Pennsylvania, we partnered with PA DEP's Stream Improvement Program, has partnered to provide for most events we've had in the past and ongoing to supply that 25%. So really good opportunity for sponsors to help out, landowners, property owners in their community. Move on to the fun stuff. Let's see some before and after. We like to showcase the program and what good it's able to do. So here's some damage of a site in York County from Ida. So you can see likely these concrete blocks would have been nicely used up and down the stream there, and kind of see the vertical cut erosion. So we came in here and we're able to put in riprap sloped up along the bank, do some final grading and seeding. You can see how close it was to the residents there. This is a fun one. The landowner gave us an action shot of the storm event. So the wall's there, and then it's shown falling in. So this was after the storm event, right up against the house there. So we worked through more of a vertical bank repair through a modular block retaining wall. Finished project there. This is in Northampton County in 2018, one I worked on. Pretty severe, scary situation with what all that could pull in. We came in and removed that, put in stacked rock repair. This is below the bridge, kind of brought the property owner's fence in, that tree's leaning into the stream. This is a retaining wall. I don't have a picture of that one finished, that kind of fell in. The flood water basically came up out of bank and kind of eroded back behind this precast wall. We came in, removed that big tree, and did that repair there, and did some riprap on the opposite bank. So kind of a little review here, kind of going over the process and the timing for policy on what we should get things done. Now there's some leniency to do waivers and extend things if the workload or sponsors come in late, we can sometimes accept. But the big thing to talk about is once we're allocated funding, we would work through an agreement, a sponsor-led agreement. So they would be the contract holder with the construction contract. But then once we receive the funding, technically we should be complete with construction 220 days after the funding comes in. So about 7 months. And typically NRCS has the capacity to do the design and then the construction inspections. We have a lot of field offices with a lot of technical capacity to inspect these. So typically it's done in-house. Sometimes when there's, say, a utility jeopardized or exposed, maybe we don't want to actively pursue the engineering, so we can work with the sponsor to do a design, and can sometimes include technical reimbursement for those fees through that. So a big undertaking, a lot of documentation comes in, tracking goes along with this program, which I can touch on. So the last few slides here are just summarizing some events we've had in the past and ongoing. We've closed out the tropical storm Ida in 2021. So here's some final statistics. We had 35 eligible sites enrolled and 33 were constructed. One, I think, that backed out. The landowner went ahead and repaired it on their own and didn't want to wait. So that can happen often. Obviously, it's an emergency program. We try to go as fast as we possibly can, but sometimes landowners need to do what they need to do to fix the situation. So in 13 counties, we had 15 sponsors. So a lot of these sites, multiple sites per sponsor, which is great. Less paperwork, which is always good. 2.8 million in construction costs total. So you can see the breakdown where we were at NRCS with the 75% and the amount DEP was able to fund there. 43 residents and businesses were protected, and part of that we also track the amount of people living in each home or working out of that business. So about 94 individuals were protected with the bank protection. Here's some kind of before and after in Tioga County there. Ongoing events. These are all local declarations. So there was no federal threshold made. Some of these might ring a bell. July, Reading area got hammered. They got 8 or 9 inches in 3 or 4 hours. So we are in 3 counties in July from that event, 10 sites, and we're actively, some are working through permitting, hopefully getting started soon. But within probably early in the new year, we should have all those wrapped up, and it's estimated 1.4 million in total costs with NRCS to reimburse 75% of it. September, that was in the northern kind of Lackawanna Scranton area, got hit pretty good. 7 sites, one's been completed, 3 counties, 3 sponsors, and about $1 million in estimated cost to repair those. And then April, that was Pittsburgh area, got hit pretty good, if you remember that in the news. 9 sites, and we received funding just recently for those, so we're working through the agreement process. So 7 counties and 7 sponsors, and 1.4 million in estimated repair costs. So pretty significant. This is probably one of the worst ones I've seen within like 2 feet of the building there. So that's one we're moving forward with the design quicker than normal. You know, some of these high risk ones we can kind of prioritize a little bit. This one's right in Pittsburgh. Took out telephone pole, and so. And then the one we have going on right now is Debbie. So we have 12 counties and 12 sponsors. We're expecting right around 80 or more sites. That's looking like we looked at Potter County, and numbers are kind of coming in that they got hit really good. Tioga County and Lycoming. So right in here, it hit really pretty bad. So we're assessing those, communicating, working with DEP to try to help sponsors with the 25% as well. So we're estimating maybe it's closer to the 6 or 7 million, but we'll see. We're assessing that now and putting a lot of staff time in to look at that. What I had.
Ready for his question now. Rick, if you want to come off mute.
Hey, Rick. No?
Write it in the chat. I offered.
Okay. Well, Rick, if you get a chance to come off mute, you're welcome to ask your question. If not, we'll move forward. If there are any more questions from the room or from the group online. Thank you. Great job. Just a minute to get you up there.
Well, Susan's getting it up. I think I know most people in the room. Those online, I'm Tim Peters, the state engineer at NRCS, and prepared to give a quick update, technical update on the engineering side of things for the past quarter. And normally I'd give an EWP update as part of it, but Mark took care of that today. So thanks, Mark. A lot of fun projects going on the watershed side. So that was a fun presentation. All right, engineering updates for this quarter. It's going to be quick. 2 things I wanted to hit. One is, oh, I can pause.
No problem.
Rick, are you able to ask your question?
I don't have a question.
Oh, okay, then, thank you.
We just called you out for nothing.
It's a tough group here. So two things that I did want to hit though. Standards, where we're at with standards. I sent several documents, I think it was 14 practices this past year out to the state subcommittee for comments. I do appreciate, I didn't get a lot of comments, but I do appreciate what came back. And I don't know what's coming this next year. I'm expecting we'll get at least a couple to update this upcoming year. So always appreciate good comments to make those standards more technically appropriate for Pennsylvania. And then I also wanted to hit an engineering roundtable as well that I'd like to do this winter. So these are the practices that we did put out for comment. The standards went out for comment over summer, and then we developed them and got them ready for submission to FOTOG, Field Office Tech Guide Section 4. That's where you'll find these practices. Now, my first bullet there says there are some issues with the transfer system from where these documents get submitted and housed. There is currently a slight issue with the system where the standards where they're housed, they're not being moved over to FOTOG currently. So I emailed the person in charge of that, and I'm expecting that he's going to manually move them over. I just checked before the meeting. That didn't happen quite yet, but that could happen anytime. So you will see these standards in FOTOG very, very soon. Now, last state technical committee meeting, I went through almost all of the documents and highlighted what had changed, with the exception of two practices, the waste storage facility and the pond ceiling or lining, so the two top ones there. So I wanted to hit that a little bit here this afternoon. So what is changing? Well, not a whole lot of technical content on these standards. There is some wording changes. There's a few things that National developed or changed, and so we did incorporate those changes. We had first item that did change that low hazard structures were added under conditions where the practice applies, and that was not worded that way in the past. Additionally, nutrient management plan was added as a basis for determining storage period, so that is a change. The third one, we tweaked the wording for freeboard requirements, so there's no content change there. There's no change to what freeboard requirements we have, but the wording was tweaked to be consistent with PA state law. We also had clarification from national wording on the liquid waste storage facility foundations, what's required for that. And then a change the national had was that they are defining the embankment effective height as downstream of that embankment to the crest of the spillway. Getting through them, the separation requirements between the floor slabs and bedrock foundations, that was revised, the wording there. And then they did add some considerations for health and safety that didn't exist before. And they changed the consideration for existing, well, what they did is they added a consideration for considering existing BMPs when planning a 313. So common sense stuff, but it was wording that was added to the standard. And then finally, they added a consideration section for improving air quality. So the wording, there was a section previously and they just revised the wording. So not a lot of content changes. Mostly just tweaking the wording and providing some updates. But if you have any questions as you're going through it and want to talk, feel free to reach out. Next one, want to go back. This is only the standard that's being updated. We currently are holding back on the practice specification, so that will be coming in the future. We're waiting on some National Engineering Manual policy clarification from National, and once that happens, then we'll get the specification out as well. So just the standard. The next standard or the last standard that I need to highlight the changes is the pond ceiling or lining geomembrane or geosynthetic clay liner. And this practice is most often applied when we are doing a liquid manure storage that has a HDPE liner. That's the application where the standard gets used in Pennsylvania. So a couple of the changes that did occur is that the purpose section was revised, that now this practice could be used when there's a need to reduce pollution to potential drinking water sources. So that's new wording in the purpose section. There was a change to the conditions where the practice applies. So now there's a section that says when water conservation is needed to protect surface or groundwater from contamination or to provide water for irrigation of livestock. So that is new wording for the practice. And then they did go and update all the geomembrane requirements, the thicknesses for the geomembrane, different materials. HDPE did not change. So that had been 60 mil and that continues to be 60 mil now. So that,
HDPE.
HDPE is high density polyethylene, and it's basically really thick plastic garbage bags. You know, a typical heavy duty garbage bag might be 3 mil. The HDPE ones that are 60 mil are like 20 of them stacked on top of each other. And that's very typical for liquid storage tanks in Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
They updated the wording for the leak detection, what's required, but no content changes for Pennsylvania. So the wording has changed a little bit, but Pennsylvania's been doing leak detection on our storages since we've been doing it. And then there were some new bullets added under considerations for safety and minimizing unwanted access to liners. So safety, keeping people out, but also keeping wildlife out, which could compromise a liner. You know, if a deer jumps into a line storage, that could easily puncture a liner, and then you're going to have an issue with a leak. So just some added wording about trying to reduce that opportunity. All right. With my remaining minute or two, I did want to say upcoming trainings, and I had it in my agenda in the beginning. I want to do a winter engineering roundtable. We always do that within Pennsylvania. We try to do it's been virtual the last couple of years, and we've been getting presenters from across the country. And even we had a presenter from, I think it was Germany a year or two ago. And we try to hit engineering technologies, current events within the engineering world. Sometimes we talk about concrete design, but a lot of times it's involving engineering, waste management, different technologies. So I am currently looking for speakers. I'm currently looking for topics. I've put messages out to the NRCS staff, but now I'm putting it out to the group here, especially the engineering teams that might be interested in participating as a participant, or if you have topics that you think would be good, really glad to hear about that. So I'd greatly appreciate it. And then I'll also highlight finally that our boot camps are scheduled for this upcoming spring. So boot camp trainings, really excited to be doing those. We do them every year and really get to provide a lot of good content to newer staff, to conservation careers. And so boot camp 1, boot camp basics, is going to be March 24 to 27 in person with 3 virtual mornings. And then boot camp 2 will be held April 7 to 11 in person with 2 virtual mornings. And boot camp basic is held in Lewisburg in person. And then the level 2, the in-person locations would be here at the state office and also at the Fort Indian Town Gap. And that is what I have. Yes, Susan.
Just a quick point to make. So the engineering roundtable is for all partners and internal. So anyone in the engineering field.
Absolutely. And probably a lot of the engineering staff on the call have attended in the past. It's a training opportunity we've been offering for many years now. And we really like to see that continue. And we want the content to be good and appropriate. So if there are topics that would be beneficial, please let me know. We can find speakers to cover that.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Any questions for? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
You all set for me? Or?
Just one moment. Yep. Oh, did you have a PowerPoint?
Yep.
Oh, okay. You go right ahead then.
Yeah, just some talking points. Quickly wanted to share with the group 2 new interim conservation practices that are being released this fiscal year. Like Tim said, these will show up on the Pennsylvania Field Office Technical Guide in the next few days, hopefully. But hopefully you'll be able to check out the standards and the tools we're using for those new practices. And if anyone has any feedback, I know we may or may not be short on time, but I will put my contact information in the chat if you have any questions or comments beyond this meeting. The first of those practices has an absurdly long name. So that's practice 822, and that is non-ruminant livestock outdoor management of vegetative cover.
Wow.
So this is for managing the disturbance of plants or soils with non-ruminants like horses or poultry to benefit plant health, soil health, or reduce water pollution. You can imagine a horse exercise lot. I'm sorry, did you have any?
I just wondered if there's a document I can bring up for you.
There's not, it's not released
Okay.
on Field Ops Technical Guide yet,
Great. Thank you.
but hopefully soon. But you can imagine a horse exercise lab where we've got a lot of bare dirt, we've got manure runoff, we've got sediment runoff, and we want to try and manage the amount of time the animals are there, how long, how often they're allowed there in order to change that situation so that we get, for example, 3 inches of cover at all times, 80% soil cover with vegetation at all times. So managing the animals, and you can imagine this sounds pretty similar to prescribed grazing. And the difference here is that these animals are probably not getting any or just a very negligible amount of their diet from the grass there. So
Can you define the non-ruminant livestock terminology just for anyone, a lay person on?
sure. So yeah, anything other than a ruminant, so anything other than cow, sheep, goat. So I guess technically we could be talking about, I mean, I've written grazing plans for zebras. So I guess you
Wow.
get into anything, but in Pennsylvania, we're mostly
Equine.
focusing on horses, maybe poultry. This might be used for, but in Pennsylvania, horses are probably the main culprit for bare ground.
Yes, thank you.
So we'd be differentiating this 822 versus prescribed grazing based on whether or not the animals are getting much of their diet from that ground. We'd use tools like pasture condition scoring and a pasture nutrient calculator in order to determine whether or not we have a resource concern on that ground or not. And then we develop a plan based on addressing that resource concern. Producers would be required to maintain records to prove that they're managing according to the plan. Also, questions, just keep thought through.
Do we have anything?
Next to those two new practices is 827 as an exciting one. It's called Strategic Harvested Forage Management. So this is managing how we're feeding harvested forages. So basically hay and silage. How are we feeding them on the land in order to address resource concern? And again, pretty similar resource concerns: plant health, soil health, reducing water pollution. The most obvious application for this would be bale grazing, where we're strategically placing hay bales on the land and allowing animals to at a limited time to have access to those bales. So we're basically feeding on pasture over the winter to strategically distribute the hay's nutrients and organic matter. So we do that through the manure that's a result, or from the wasted hay. We'd be adding organic matter and nutrients on the land, as opposed to feeding those same forages in a heavy use area. We require this practice to fit within a bigger prescribed grazing system. It can't just be a standalone practice. We'll also be requiring annual soil testing to make sure we're not overloading that soil with nutrients from all that hay and feeding out on the land. We don't want to create a new resource concern. Livestock will not be allowed to be fed on any one spot for longer than 3 days. So that would be an important limiting factor to keep us from creating damage. And there needs to be reseeding afterwards if there's a bare spot created. Again, producers will need to keep records to show that they're managing based on that plan. Again, I'll put my contact information in the chat,
Please.
but any questions now? Okay, awesome.
Any
Well, thank
questions
you.
in the room? Thank you, Brian. So you'll put that was Brian Campbell, our state grazing specialist, and he'll put his information in the chat.
Thank you, Sue.
Thanks, Brian. And anyone who is on our list will get review of that interim or that technical standard when it's appropriate. Okay, and we do not have a soils report. Today, Yuri Plowden is actually in Philadelphia doing some lead screening for using our PXRF tool. So we will move to the partnership and easement program reports, and we're going to have an outreach report from Abigail with some urban spiced in there. And I just want to call out to Dimka Braswell, who's our co-chair of our Urban Ag Subcommittee. There's been a lot accomplished this year, and we're going to go over some of that. So thank you. And we also have on today, I believe, Freddie Patino Rodriguez, who's our staff in Philadelphia. So let me just bring that up for you. Okay.
All right, thanks, Susan. Hello, everyone. I am Abigail Appleman, the Outreach Coordinator at PA. And most of you are familiar. It was great to see some familiar names online as well. But for anyone who doesn't know me, a couple years ago, I was the Hispanic Outreach Technician here in our state. When I'm not here at work, I am a farmer in Northumberland County in Central PA. So just to clarify, I want to put it out there that when I talk about outreach, I'm really talking about outreach to our customers. So this is external outreach. And we call that Title VI under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is just a little update so you can see how much outreach was performed across our state in fiscal year 24, ending on September 30th. And my title is Outreach Coordinator, and Susan had this role before I did, but I want to be clear, one person cannot get to this many locations. This is really outreach happening at every level. So the state office performs outreach. Susan has certainly coordinated a lot of it, but also all the way down through the field staff performing outreach in their local areas. So there's a whole lot of stars on that map. And I wanted to point out too, we've got a nice pie chart on here. The gray section would be efforts coordinated by the state office. And the other three slices of that pie show us that all three of the regions of PA are doing really pretty equal efforts at outreach. The other thing I wanted to show you is the top forms of outreach that are coming out. And I need to get close there because
Sure, no problem.
they don't all show up on my chart. I'll mention here, over 79,000 people were reached directly by NRCS in this past year. That's fantastic. All right, so the orange bar chart, the top activities were an exhibit or a display. A lot of times those were at a fair. Someone would set up a booth. And even if it's there over the weekend and staff can't get there every minute, there's still NRCS info available. A lot of them had others. So these are creative options that weren't otherwise listed in the checkboxes that they could choose between. Presentations, mailings, and field days. So we've got a lot of different types of outreach activities happening around the state. I want to put a quick plug in here too. So having this mapped out, our staff can plug this in any time in the year and see their efforts. So we can, get through our first quarter and look back and say, did we do outreach this quarter? Yeah, we did. And then next quarter, we'll see more stars on the map. And this system has been adopted nationwide, so that other states are now using this as well. Susan, I'm going to kind of bounce this back and forth with you a little bit. We wanted to talk about the Philadelphia urban office that was open.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about it, but this month, last year, we opened the Urban Service Center in Philadelphia. We had an opening ceremony and met the owners of the building. There's a People's Garden there, so we kind of christened that and had a nice time last October at this time. And a lot of work has been done by Freddie, by our FSA staff there, Nina and Veronica, as well as Kafeni Kajela, our urban soil conservationist. So I think there's a couple of stats on here that will highlight their work.
Thanks, Susan. So this slide shows in red, orange, and yellow the urban zones that we've delineated for our urban fund pull through EQIP across the state. Urban farmers, urban growers are eligible for EQIP. They're eligible for CSP. They're eligible for our other programs as well. But we wanted to kind of earmark these areas and do some focused work in those regions. So in fiscal year 24, we had over $200,000 that we allocated in contracts. And I think, do I have it on the next slide? So I'm going to toggle back and forth between these slides. So we have the number of contracts by county here, but I also wanted to show you just eagle eye view here where those contracts landed. And so I also, with that, want to talk about some of the things coming in fiscal year 25. Ryan, you have perfect timing. We're talking about urban EQIP contracts. So I noticed looking at this map that most of those contracts are in the southern half of our state. And so one of my goals in outreach in the coming year is to make sure that the producers in the other cities that we've designated as urban, within the urban fund pool for EQIP are aware that that we have program assistance available to them. And I also want to start identifying barriers to assistance. One of the things we have up and coming in this next year is the Pittsburgh Urban Office. And this week, a couple of us got to meet the NRCS staff member who's going to be in that office. FSA has also hired a person to work in the urban office in Allegheny County. And so we're pretty excited for that opening. We do not have a date yet, but we do know the staff are already focused on covering that area. Did you want to add anything on this slide?
I don't think I would. Again, hearing from our state technical committee, urban subcommittee, we really looked at how can we gain a new customer base, reach other folks, create diversity in our program offerings, as well as look at the metropolitan statistical areas. So that was how we came up with those priority areas. And from Denise down to Jared Shippey, our program, our Assistant State Conservation for program, we decided we still wanted to have that urban ag fund pool expanded across the state and see how we could better serve those cities that, as you mentioned, Abigail. So thank you.
Susan, do you want to talk too about the People's Gardens?
Sure. The People's Garden Initiative is under the Office of Urban Ag and Innovative Production. Now, it's been in existence for quite some time. It came from Lincoln's, back at Abraham Lincoln calling the garden around the White House was the People's Garden. So we wanted to create an initiative that looked at how do we feed our communities. So any garden can register. We were provided, luckily, some funding in the last 2 years through the American Rescue Plan Act, as well as our conservation technical assistance to provide some projects with some funding, some garden projects that are growing healthy food, that are supporting the food system, that are teaching people within those areas about sustainable practices, and also those that are nurturing. It might be pollinator habitat or green spaces in these built environments that really need to be called upon to nurture the community. So there were two projects funded in 23, and those were in Philadelphia. There were then 5 projects funded in Philadelphia in 24. All 5 projects are going well. One has closed already. That was the Philadelphia Orchard Project. I believe Freddie and the staff in Philadelphia have visited all of those projects and have really, we're seeing a lot of great momentum. We hope that the project is funded, but if nothing else, folks can register community gardens within the People's Garden website. It's on the screen there for you. If you need any support, do let me know. I am the contact for that within Pennsylvania. So happy to help any way we can. It is a national program, so we hope that there'll be another slug of funding. We do have an agreement with National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. They funded just one project this year in the Pittsburgh area through Grow Pittsburgh. We visited that site the other day, and that should be a fantastic project within the Pittsburgh community of Braddock. So I'll go ahead with this one. And Freddie, again, this is a call out to you and our folks at FSA, Nina and Veronica. And actually it was through an agreement with PASA. So thank you, PASA, as well, in holding some open houses, I guess it was, maybe they had food there too. So invited producers or growers within the Philadelphia area to come into the office, meet the staff, and talk about how we can get folks started with getting farm numbers and being eligible for programs. So that was very successful. There were over 100 growers that were reached through outreach and technical assistance, working on eligibility. So again, identifying barriers. And one of the big barrier in Philadelphia has been land access. And I know Dimka talks passionately about that as well. So that's something that was accomplished this year, thanks to the staff there and thanks to our partners. Collaborating with the PA Department of Ag, we've been working very well with them. Does everyone know there's a food policy council statewide now that's being run out of the Department of Agriculture? There's a working group. There's going to be a forum at the farm show on January 9th that we just started finalizing some details for, so that will reach all of you. You're welcome to come. There's a lot of forward movement in also installing a conservation district office in Philadelphia. Denise, do you want to speak to that at all?
Tentatively have a hearing to discuss that November 15th.
Yes. So Denise and others will be testifying at that hearing. And certainly the Department of Ag has a new urban ag contact. I don't know if Dr. Jamie Green is on today, but shout out to all of our partners that we're working with statewide to really look at how we can have an impact on those growers that are growing for their own communities. Not a huge sector of agriculture, but certainly one that we can service. And then Pittsburgh opening was the other.
We
Go
should
ahead.
say that Tim Scott is the district conservationist and he will be starting, so he will be working, I believe it begins in
December.
So, while he may not have a physical location, they're working on that. He'll be probably stationed in their office for the time being.
And that's for the Pittsburgh Service Center.
Amy, there is an unnamed guest online with a question.
Okay. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask, or ask in the chat?
They disappeared.
All right, let us know when they're back on,
Yeah.
Okay.
or if the question
Please.
pops up in the chat too. Do you want to talk about the PXRF?
I can do that. And this is on behalf of our soil staff. Yuri Plowden is actually in Philadelphia, as I mentioned. So the PXRF is a soil screening tool, as you can see in the pictures. From 2023 to 2024, 17 sites in Philadelphia, Delaware County, Dauphin County, Lancaster County, and Berks County were tested, were surveyed. Now this is looks for lead and those elements that can cause damage to crops or can cause uptake within plants. So that's what you can see. Kafeni Kajila is working there on the ground to do that screening. So the types of sites they're looking at, you can see there. They've done a lot of the testing, and again, it goes to what we plan within that area. So it's one of the first things to do that we can do with a grower in an urban area that has concerns about previous contamination. So go ahead. This was the findings that Yuri put together for a national presentation on what has been found. I won't go through every one of them, but maybe on the bottom, because vacant lots are really a lot of the places where some of these sites are being installed. So they once had houses and they have elevated lead and all kinds of different things that could be on those sites. We look at garden beds that are amended with compost. They were found to have less than 100 parts per million. So that was a good level. I think the average, the Superfund remediation was 200 parts per million, and DEP has a threshold of 500 parts per million. So the areas closest to the buildings and streets typically had higher lead. And there may be situations where we suggest a raised bed with some amended soil that can go. And thank you. So working as a team, there's a couple of pictures there from Philadelphia, some success stories. The one garden, we installed all of those raised beds because of that concern of elevated lead. So that's been successful. And I don't know if Freddie's on or anybody want to add anything about Philadelphia?
So our unnamed guest said there was Thrivent Communities event with Overbrook Environmental Center, 19-22. Lots of information to process. Thanks from Philadelphia Food Advisory Council. There's a land bank hearing at 10:30. The community and network is prepping for. Looking forward to the Conservation District hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She's got time. There she is.
Yeah, like actively busy right now. There are a couple of meetings. Y'all will actually see a civic action about the arena on the news. A lot of us growers and activists are literally busy in meetings and trying to talk to people and the community members. We're literally managing policy as we go, but we are, and Dr. Green is aware from the Thriving Communities event last week. But yeah, we're literally doing a lot. So we're very grateful for everything that y'all are doing. We, as you know, with Philadelphia, there's a lot of moving parts, and that's what we're doing right now. Looking forward to the Conservation District. I think it's a PACD meeting. Myself, Erica Mines, who is the manager for Philadelphia's Food Advisory Council, and some new members will be going to that meeting for the Conservation District and getting some information. And we'll be reporting out to our members, and we are moving forward with a steering committee. So we will be better prepared policy-wise to work with other committee members. And I'm also now part of the East Mount Airy Neighbors Association. I'm on the board. We'll be working with Reclaim Philadelphia and probably Reparations Task Force and environmental justice. So we're actively busy, and a lot of us are, doing a lot of things, and we thank you. So,
Thank you, Dimka. Thank you and your team.
Yeah, it's been a good year in Philadelphia for us to be there and to see some of the activity that's been going on for years. Giving credit where credit's due, you all have been doing the work for years. So we're happy to support and hope that our presence there makes a difference. So
it's been extremely helpful for internet access. So thank you, as well as the technical assistance.
Thank you, Dimka.
Okay. And then the last slide on behalf of the soils section is the Pittsburgh's Urban Soil Survey update. They've begun that and are working hard to map really the soil survey had urban soil was a description of the soil. So they're working to really identify and make interpretations of those urban soils.
That's my contact info if anyone wants to reach out. Tim.
I had a question. Going back to your map with all of the outreach events, are there any unique or clever outreach activities or events that maybe you could highlight and share? And sorry if that's putting you on the spot. That's okay. I just thought maybe there's something clever that was done.
I started at the end of August and I have not combed through all of these. I've heard good things. We always participate in Ag Progress Days. I heard a good thing about a Pittsburgh event, which had to do with veterans in farming. And that they said that's definitely a repeat event that we want to do again. Is there anything that comes to you?
Well, in the Scranton area, you see all those stars. We have a star, actually have a star. Deb Basiliga in that area has done a lot of farm markets. She's gone to farm markets. They've had open houses. So they're doing a tremendous job in that area. And we hope didn't get any contracts or new customers signed up in the Scranton area. Again, they're identifying barriers for us all over the state. The other thing we want to do is to really look at communities they're connecting with, and are there communities that we can serve that we haven't thought of? We know there's a big Bhutanese population out toward Pittsburgh. We know that we have an agreement with the Korean American Farmers Association. We're starting to look at Reading and Allentown area as communities that could be served by our services and our technical assistance. So those are ones that jump out to me. Certainly Horse Progress Days in Lancaster. I know that brought in, there were about 30,000 people there. I don't know that we counted 30,000 people, but it was a huge event where we had a soil pit, we had our soil tunnel, and we had a rainfall simulator there to work with the Plains Sect to really look at increasing the cover within those areas. So I know they had a successful event there. Nothing else comes to mind right now, but maybe next time we can highlight certain events because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on.
Thanks for that question.
Anybody else have questions? Okay. Thank you.
Hey,
Thank you very much. Yes.
This
Hi,
is
Freddie.
Freddie from, how you guys doing? Good.
Good. Hope you're doing well. Go
Yes,
ahead.
I just want to add for the outreach events, we also have been creating potluck, open house, like you mentioned, but also we've been attending to different communities such as Thriving Communities Resource Fair. We have been in college as a Temple, Drexler, and we have been taking the message to all the communities that we can just reach out here. Um, it's been a great income that we have been getting from comparing from last year to this year. Um, we can say, or I can say, that we have improved from 5 applications that we got from the first year. Thanks to the outreach events that we've been having, we just got about 17 or 18. And I hope that number keep increasing. So it's been a great process because most of the communities, they at least in the urban area, they didn't know we were here. But now having the opportunity, such as the Tinka, he's been an incredible source, Dr. Jamie Green and others, it's been a great process of outreach and connecting, creating a better network with other customers.
Congratulations. And so that was for our first sign up cutoff date is November 1st. So you're saying 17 applications for this first round of applications?
17. And I hope to get
Wonderful.
a higher number than that at the end of November.
Congratulations and thanks for your work.
Thank you.
And you want to mention the outreach event that Penny's organized?
I don't have all the details.
Oh, yes,
Unfortunately.
yes, I do have it. I'm so sorry. We're having an
Do you?
outreach event. Yes, I do. We are having an outreach events and we are inviting farmers, and it will be on November 13. We have inviting farmers and employees from NRCS in PA. This is a farm to farm tour. And Kefeni, Damien, Leopard, and folks from FSA as Nina, Berryman, Veronica, Elderman, and my new intern, Paige, we have been working on this event. So we are planning to do this outreach event to show them, to talk about NRCS programs, about the new things that we are having for urban farms. And it's going to be a great event. I do have the agenda. If you give me 1 minute, that's something I can just quick open and show it to you.
Maybe if you could put your contact information in the chat, and if folks are interested, they can contact you directly, Freddie. Would that be
Perfect.
okay?
I will do that. Yes. Anybody that is interested to participate on that event, please feel free to reach me out, or Kefeni. I'm gonna put my contact email and my work cell phone number. Feel free to reach out to me. Thank you, Susan.
Okay, thank you so much.
Andrew also shared that the Delaware River Festival may be a good event to connect efforts across the Delaware watershed and City of Philadelphia ag activities.
Excellent. Thank you, Kurt. Okay, we have next Melissa Hanner, excuse me, giving update on agricultural conservation easement programs. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So first time seeing all of you again in the new fiscal year 2025. I want to thank everybody for your participation. And who is everybody? Well, it's the entities that bring us our easement applications and help us enroll new land into farm and forest preservation. So I want to say thank you to those ag preservation boards in Cumberland, Schuylkill, Lebanon, Dauphin. I want to say thank you to the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. Thank you to the Land Conservancy of Adams County, Monada Conservancy, Berks Nature, and probably I've left somebody else out, but thank you to the entities that do a lot of the heavy lifting to help preserve land using federal funds. We had a good year with the federal ASEP AL program. We protected, we enrolled working farms that will eventually go into closed easements, almost 1,000 acres, and $1.6 million have been committed towards preserving farmland through ASEP AL. Jumping to the bottom, the RCPP, Regional Conservation Partnership Program. We had the Kittatinny Ridge program as our most active easement program, also 1,200 acres pledged, 1.6 million pledged in enrollments to close easements within the next year or two through that project. A smaller project is our U.S. held easement program, the ASAP Wetland Reserve Easement Program. But we are excited for all enrollments, and we had 2 new enrollments this year in Juniata, Lebanon County. Next slide. Just a reminder and get the word out. The federal funds for easement acquisition are ASAP, our Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, and RCPP easements. For the most part, these are entity-held easements. Federal funds are awarded to our partners that are purchasing the conservation easements. And then we do have one U.S. held easement program, which is the ASAP Wetland Reserve Easement Program. So,
Next slide.
yes.
Okay.
We use these words and acronyms all the time. So I'm just one more slide to review. Entity held, those means partners are taking, are offering to purchase an easement to protect the land. This is farm preservation or protect a forest from development. And the partners are applying to NRCS to get the funds to purchase that easement. We provide a 50% purchase price, 50% match to purchase the easement. And US held, those are easements that the NRCS, the United States, is holding the easement. If it is a US held easement, you apply at the NRCS field office. If it's a partner held easement, you apply directly with the partner, directly with the Land Preservation Board or the Land Trust. And just more information on easement applications and enrollment. You can find information online if you Google Pennsylvania NRCS easement programs. Landowners are indirect beneficiaries to the federal funds. They are applying through a partner, but they indirectly get those federal funds when the easement is purchased. And all USDA participants, even those indirect beneficiaries, have to become established to receive federal funds at the local farm service agency. Whether you're applying for EQIP or CSP or an easement that's getting federal funds, that's the process. And then because the US is a third-party rights holder contributing 50% of the easement match, we also participate in the easement acquisition process. We visit, we help make sure there's a farm plan or a forest management plan on the land, and we do some basic due diligence, which means we go out and see the land and make sure that it is vetted for farm preservation to protect conservation values. New every year for the Wetland Reserve Easement Program, we post our geographic area rate caps. So this is the valuation method that is used to purchase US held easements. So if you are working with a landowner or you are a landowner interested in knowing what is the maximum amount you might receive for an easement on your land, you could look up the easement programs on PA NRCS website, and we announce these geographic area rate caps. Just a reminder, we have new 2025 signups for all of our programs, including easements. There is a lot of money to help preserve land this year. We have our annual average funding. In addition, this year, we are doubling the amount of funds available through the Inflation Reduction Act, so the IRA funding. So if you are interested in land preservation, this is a great year to bring in applications. There is a lot of funding to help preserve our forests and farms. And if you have specific questions, you can contact me, Melissa Hanner, for easement acquisitions. And if you have questions about existing easements, you'll contact Mick Albert, and our contact information is here.
Thank you. Any questions from Melissa? Okay, thank you. I forgot to clap. Okay, next we have, I guess, Ryan Cornelius speaking for the program staff. There's a point clicker there if you'd like. Okay. Huh.
I'm assuming I'm being right back.
Going to the
Yeah,
computer?
works.
Abigail broke it.
I didn't break it. The blue light is.
Huh. How about I advance for you? No? Okay. What is going on here? It's not going. Let me try this way. How's that? Okay. Sure, thank you.
Everyone, I'm Ron Cornelius, I'm the Equip Program Manager, and FY24 was a great year for programs. So, as you all know, we have had unprecedented funding opportunities this past year, and we're going to have even more opportunity this year. But so Equip Farm Bill funding last year, we did 401 contracts for over $29 million. Through the IRA Equip funding, we did 386 contracts for almost 32 million. So all in all, when you're looking at Equip as a whole, we did 787 contracts for over $61 million, and a lot of good conservation getting on the ground thanks to that. So, and of that 787, 214 of those contracts were historically underserved participants receiving contracts for almost $15 million. So great year. AMA, it's a much smaller funding pool, but we ended up getting 29 contracts for almost $400,000, and 23 of those 29 were with historically underserved producers. So great year for FY24, but on to FY25. Well, okay. We have one last thing on FY24. So we did over 20 million in practice implementation in 24. So just some highlighted practices that we typically show here. Some of the big popular items. We did 61 waste storage facilities, over 15,000 acres cover crop, 6 acres of wildlife habitat planting, almost 2,000 acres of prescribed grazing, 175,000 square feet of heavy use area protection, and over 11,000 acres of nutrient management. Okay, now on to FY25. So ranking our first round application cutoff deadlines, same as they've been the previous years. So November 1st. So first round application cutoff for EQIP, AMA, and RCPP is November 1st. And then every 2 months after that, on the 1st of the month, we'll end up looking at the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and so on ranking deadlines or ranking or sorry, they call them ranking deadlines, but what they are is application cutoff deadlines. We accept applications year round, but at those points in time is where we have the cutoff and we look at applications that we received in those batching periods. Eligibility timeframes. So the first round eligibility, so applications that have their participants who have their applications in with us by November 1st need to have their eligibility determined and updated with FSA by January 1st. So gives them 2 months to get that taken care of. But again, these are the same as they've been the last 3-4 years. So for FY25, so we received a general allocation, a regular EQIP general of over $20 million. This includes $795,000 for the Golden Wing Warbler Initiative, $495,400 for the Joint Chief Forestry Initiative, and $1.8 million in NWQI. So that's just EQIP general through the Farm Bill. Through IRA funds, we're going to be receiving another $41.6 million. So going to be another big year for us, but we have the work. So we are utilizing the Act Now ranking process as we did last year. We're going to be utilizing that for a few pools. Last year, we did the EQIP IRA cover crop initiative. We're still doing that. We're allocating $5 million per area. So the Northeast, Southeast, and West. The new one's going to be the EQIP IRA pollinator. We're setting aside $200,000 for that to start there. IRA flares, covers, and liners. So this is looking at capturing biogas off of manure storages and lagoons and installing flares. We were able to look at replacing liners of lagoons that have liners that are past the practice lifespan and looking at replacing those and then putting a cover on them. So that's going to be a good opportunity for farmers there. Our stream corridor fund code, that's one that we've historically offered, but we're going to be doing the Act Now process with that. Same thing with AFO, CAFO poultry, and then forestry as well. And so this Act Now process, it's the same, it's all EQIP, but we are processing these applications first. So we have a November 1st sign up deadline for the first round all across EQIP, AMA, and RTP. But the Act Now fund code, we are looking at the applications that we received by November 1st. If those applications will be screened and ranked, and then as money allows, if we have more money after that first batch of application that goes through, we will look at another batch of applications, alternating every 2 weeks. So again, if someone is interested in signing up for these programs, I urge you to have them put an application with us. The sooner the better. Again, if they're in by November 1st, they'll be considered for first round. If they're after that, they could still be considered for later rounds if funding allows. But and if not, that could be, and if we don't get down that far, it'll be an application that'll be first round following year. So our FY25 EQIP priority practices. So this should, for those of you who've attended the October meetings before, this shouldn't be new to you, but what we have is a set of practices that are considered priority practices, or not practices that are very popular practices. So these are not to help with practices that we do a lot of all the time. This is to help get more of these types of practices installed. So our list includes prescribed burning, riparian herbaceous cover, stream habitat improvement and management, aquatic organism passage, tree and shrub site preparation on abandoned mine lands, stream bank and shoreline protection, denitrifying bioreactors, tree and shrub establishment on abandoned mine lands, wetland restoration, and phosphorus removal system. So these are the same practices that we have used, that we used last year, but these practices are going to receive a 90% cost share rate under EQIP General. So, under this, these are going to be receiving a higher payment rate compared to other practices where you're going to be receiving like on the average a 75% payment rate.
If I recall, just to add to that, and maybe Denise, you want to correct me, we did a survey of the State Technical Committee several years ago to ask about those practices that they saw as underutilized that could be priority practices. So the State Technical Committee, right, Dan, that we did a survey several years ago and asked our State Technical Committee to define those things that they feel are important practices that are underutilized. So that was something that directly came from this committee. So thank you.
And then in addition to those practices, we also have source water protection priority practices. Those practices are well decommissioning, arsenic treatment, stream bank and shoreline protection, denitrifying bioreactor, and the phosphorus removal system. So in order to qualify for these practices, they have to fall in on the source water protection areas that we've designated. And then Abigail already showed this, but I just wanted to stress that our urban areas expanded last year, and we're using the same ones again, but lots of opportunity out there for urban areas. It's just not the old Pittsburgh, Philly, Harrisburg. There's lots of opportunities, and hope people take advantage of that this year.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
So we want to mention that Bridge Sentinel Landscape Program is in the middle to interviewing coordinator applicants. They have 7 candidates, are halfway through the first round, and they asked them to give a presentation on themselves and their thoughts about the landscape. And they're going to ask a few back for a second round of questions and answer interviews, and then to reach out to her if anybody has any questions. Okay, she'll have her contact info.
Yeah.
And Ms. Julia Smith has a question.
Okay, Julia, you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I was just wondering for those Act Now ranking polls, because that's coming up here for November 1st is next week. What is there like a document or anything that explains what practices would fall under those pools? Like for IRA pollinator, what practices apply? Like could be funded under that?
Yeah, hey Julia. So for that one, we're looking at the 420 practice.
Pollinator
yeah,
habitat.
420 pollinator habitat. So we could possibly look at supporting, but really we're looking to try to keep these Act Now ones simple. So we're looking to try to keep that at like just 420, like our cover crop one is just 340 cover crop. So we'd be looking at the 420 pollinator habitat planning.
Could they plan like a 314 on top of that? I'm just thinking about, there's not a lot of instances where you're doing that require such a limited site prep unless you're putting it on like existing cropland.
So the 420 scenarios do include some of that payment is towards the site prep. So we probably shouldn't really be looking at including the 314 or 315 in the contract. But okay. I'd be happy to discuss though if you want to reach out. We can discuss. Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Yep. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Yep. No problem, Julie.
And you did say it, Ryan, but Act Now is really a way to streamline the application and ranking process. That's what it was intended for. So, okay. Any other questions right now? Comments? Okay. Next is Ashley Lenig.
Next slide, please. I work with several programs, including Conservation Innovation Grants, Conservation Stewardship Program, and the National Water Quality Initiative. So next slide. We funded 4 new Conservation Innovation Grants this fiscal year, this past fiscal year, 2024. And those are with Earth Care, Water Science Institute, Penn State University, and PASA. So you can see we have one here for manure-based biochar, Application rates to improve soil health is the title. Legacy sediment 4.0 management metrics. Biochar type and rate matter, controlling plant available and an N2O emissions in agricultural fields. And the last one was evaluating silvopasture practices in Pennsylvania. So each of those were either at our max of 75,000 or close to it. For CSP, I wanted to highlight what we did this past fiscal year, and this would be CSP, which is the Conservation Stewardship Program, renewals, so renewed contracts that have already been in for 5 years, and they're going to do additional work to further enhance what they're doing out in the landscape. The classic, the regular program, Conservation Stewardship Program, and then Grassland Conservation Initiative, which is almost more like a farm service program payment, where they're getting a payment for leaving their land. So we only had one or two of those, I believe. So we had 343 contracts this past year on close to 70,000 acres and over $11.9 billion. And I also show what we had in the last fiscal year, so you can see we had less contracts, a little more acreage, and $1 million less in the dollars. Next slide, please. So that brings me to what are we going to do this fiscal year? So our allocation for fiscal year 2025 is a total of 16.3, over 16.3 million. And we have 7 million allocated to our basic CSP program. And then we have over 9.3 million for CSP IRA. So IRA stands for the Inflation Reduction Act, and that is targeting our climate smart ag and forestry practices. And we have a list that's recently been updated of those. Includes a lot of our common conservation practices that are going to have a systems approach to keep good conservation.
Maybe if you wouldn't mind, I know we might have some new people on, lay people that don't understand the CSP program. Do you mind? I mean, the cap going up and thank you.
Nice compliment to the environmental quality incentive program that Ryan talked about, because that's our fixer-upper program where people are doing work to improve issues with resource concerns in the landscape and not have things like erosion and sediment loading on the stream and nutrients running to the site. So CSP have already, whether through equip or on their own, address their issues. And so we're saying they're good stewards of the land already, and what can they do to further enhance their land? So they're getting an existing activity payment for the work for showing they're already meeting resource concerns on the landscape, the work they've already done, and then they've agreed to implement something additional, usually management activity or something, as opposed to a large structural practice that you might do in equip. Any questions on that?
Well, thank you for that explanation.
Thank you for mentioning it. So I would like to say that CSP is to reward the best.
Yes.
We've been saying for years, but it's still fun. So on my next slide, you'll see our funding pools that I just created, our ranking pools rather. So these are out for CSP renewals. We'll be working on them in the first quarter of our fiscal year, or even working on them right now. And then we will be obligating our contracts by mid-December to tie up those funds.
And those are,
83
oh,
applications.
sorry.
Yeah, I have the basic pools under industrial private forest land category, that's NIPF, by area of the state, west, northeast, and southeast. We also have money that's set aside that we have to take off the top for historically underserved groups, such as beginning farmer and that socially disadvantaged farmer rancher category. So that's 5% to each of those. And then we have the ag lands listed. So if a person applies and they have both ag lands and forestry, they actually put in two separate applications for those land use. And we have a separate fund code if you're doing core and supporting practices, that Inflation Reduction Act code, and separate funding. That's the stuff that's coming off of that list. That list I mentioned, climate smart ag and forestry list, as well as things that support the core practices for others. You know,
yes, I was just going to make a point or ask a question for further clarification. So those renewals go to existing folks who have contracts, a direct letter to the landowner asking if they want to renew, correct?
Right. previously that they're interested in renewing their existing contract, folks can apply right now for our conservation stewardship program, classic non-renewal, classic contract. But the folks eligible for renewal already have expiring contracts right now.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Hey, thanks. That's from you.
And then, yeah, you have the next slide. So environmental quality incentive program is what National Water Quality Initiative falls under, and that's why Ryan spoke about it, because he's the program manager. But I cover the technical aspects of NWQI, so I like to highlight our obligations for the past fiscal year. We had 18 contracts and over $2.8 million spent on over 3,000 acres. Our allocation for 2025 is 1.8 million, but what we like to do, at least my interest is trying to get additional money going into those watersheds if possible to work there to meet the need of to not have these streams and watersheds be ag. So National Water Quality Initiative looks at ways we can eliminate ag impaired watersheds in the state and have them no longer be ag impaired. So we have turned. You can also receive money all throughout the counties across the country. Next slide. That's all I have unless there are comments or questions.
Comments, questions? Thank you, Ashley. And that was the last, no one else for presentation? Okay. And so the last thing I wanted to go over, I am working on a topic list for the fiscal year 25 that started in October. So looking for topics, what I'd like to do, because we're running this remotely, I think we maybe lose a little bit of that personal contact. So we're putting together a survey through Microsoft Forms that I'd like each of you who attend regularly and the members that are listed to fill out, just to let us get to know you, your names, the companies or organizations you represent, your skill set, your interests, and maybe topics or suggestions for us to form new committees. Someone suggested a wetland committee last year. So I'd like to hear from each of you to really look at how we can vary the meetings from meeting to meeting. I'm trying new things. So our team here, Kami, I thank you for your help. Abigail, myself, and Ted Evans will be putting together a survey to send out to each of the folks that are on our list in the next quarter for our January meeting. So this also is an open forum. Does anyone want to share anything that they're working on, that their company or their organization has done that would be something that could be noted, or to introduce themselves if they're new to the group? So we'll leave a moment for folks to speak up. Hi, Kurt, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I recently was in contact with Jeremy Weaver. He's an ag consultant formerly with Team Ag, and we're going to work on trying to create an in-school program for FFA students where they would get to tour a farm with ag BMPs, and then also try to tour the corresponding community water system that land would drain toward. I know there's a nice, robust FFA program for source water protection, but if anyone has any suggestions for more succinct material that would be useful for that, I would love to get from the ag side some suggestions on that. So just a thought. Thank you.
And if you'd like to drop me a line, I can send it out to our principal staff here and see what we can put together for you.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Liz Feinberg. Go ahead, Liz.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Liz Feinberg, and I am a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation field liaison. I work alongside other field liaisons, Christian Hughes Evans with Sustainable Chesapeake, Katie Ombowski, and Kristen Saki-Blanc. I just wanted to let folks know, in case there's not an awareness about it, that the INSR, the NIFWIF's Chesapeake Bay Stewardship Fund Innovative Nutrient Sediment Reduction Grants Program is currently open. It has a due date of November 5th. That's an annual solicitation, and it supports ag conservation work across our region within the Chesapeake Bay. So I just wanted to make that announcement. And if folks are interested in learning more about it, they can feel free to reach out to me and I can kind of handle that conversation, kind of lead that conversation or put you in touch with one of the other liaisons who would be happy to have a conversation about agricultural conservation in the Bay, in the Chesapeake Bay region in Pennsylvania.
Sure, we'd love to have a link in the chat if you'd like, Liz, to that RFA or
Yep, that
the
RFP.
website.
Yep.
Thank you so
work on
much.
that. Yep, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to share anything that's hot topics or introduce yourselves to us? Okay. Not seeing any. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. And again, I thank you all, and you'll be receiving, if there's anything for your review, you'll be receiving that, as well as a survey in the next few weeks that we'll put out Wednesday, January 22nd. Thank you. Yes. I don't know if I said Wednesday or Thursday. Okay, and thank you so much. Anything else you'd like to add, Denise? Appreciate your time.
Appreciate everybody being on the call today.
Hey, bye-bye. Thank you.